But incentive token has been like all the rage over this recent pump. I mean, it as well as PulseX, but especially incentive, mainly because it was butchered to absolute hell. Just pumped hardcore up to, I think it actually went to did it actually go to $4 or $5, or am I making that up? It's at about 2 right now.
Incentive?
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
I'm pretty certain it was at least over 4.
Yeah, it was $4.11, I believe.
Okay. So
almost 5.
Yeah.
Let me pull up that chart here real quick.
While you do that, though, yeah. So it has been absolutely flying. That followed up with, and this is always so interesting when these tweets come from Richard. But so incentive token just flew up there, and Richard tweeted. I wanted to find the actual bookmark tweet because it was pretty interesting. I have it here. But people that have already been talking about incentive tokens so much, and obviously people have been yield farming here and there, mainly with the PulseX pool over the last few weeks or months, really. I'm trying to find
$4.25, it looks like. And did
Okay.
you see Access threw his 2 cents in there? Did you see that?
I did not.
He said probably pumping the volume up and shaking down any last bits of lettuce. Always wanted that wallet to appear as though it was a trader on Dex Screener with the intent to be a net buyer.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, kind of just seeing what was there. Just a little tester to see what they could do and
what happens when that happens.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Richard's tweet on the incentive token, and thanks for that, Axis. He said up 50% today and 7x in 12 days, but I didn't talk about it. Inc, the incentive token. It's very interesting, and here's why. It looks like half of its only $70 million market cap is in PulseX liquidity pairs with PulseX and Pulse. It's minted only by PulseX farmers. The only people that hold it farmed it or got it from someone who did. The chart kind of looks like leverage on Pulse and PulseX, which I thought that last part was pretty funny for him to say. And it marked right around the local top anyway for incentive and everything really at that time. These Richard tweets are always, I've said it before, but it's like, when you're younger, or maybe I'm just talking about myself, but like you discover Pink Floyd, or for me personally, it was Tool eventually. And I'm like decoding the lyrics and what does this really mean? And I'm like, wow, this is genius and all this stuff. I like deciphering Richard's tweets and the meaning behind them. But is he telling people is he recommending, what is he, is he saying that incentive token is something to buy, or is he just trying to incentivize people more so to liquidity provide? And then we saw now this could just because of the way the market's going, but we did see the APY for the PulseX and Pulse pool go up a few days after that. But what'd you feel about his tweet? Because there's a lot of things to get leverage on Pulse right now. We know that, and we've talked about them on the show. Incentive is an interesting one because you can get it for free basically by liquidity providing. You don't have to buy it. But what did you make of his tweet on it?
Well, the thing that I took from it was to obviously not buy it. He said, I didn't say to buy it. And, he made that clear. But to provide liquidity, again, the people that have it have earned it. And I think what he was maybe recommending was to pair it with some Pulse to leverage the movement of that chain. This one has a lot less liquidity. And I think kind of maybe that's what he was doing, was to try and help increase the liquidity a little bit between PulseChain and incentive to help kind of hold that price up, because the liquidity is fairly thin. These pumps are going to happen drastically whenever PulseChain goes up in price. When it has a pullback, it didn't seem to affect. I mean, it did. Obviously, it went from 425. We touched down to $1.60, $1.62. So, that's a considerable pullback. But I took it as that, just that, use the liquidity pair. I forget what the APY on that pair, that farm is, but it's fairly high. And, I think incentive could probably run the hardest out of most, well, maybe not most coins, but it could be one or two as far as the gains that it does on this chain. So that's what I took it as. I took it as more of a play on, earn it first and then provide liquidity with PulseChain an incentive, or PulseX an incentive to get the double whammy factor, because maybe there's more magic carpet rides to come, kind of thing.
Maybe. Maybe. To that point, and talking about liquidity providing, which we really haven't talked about too much on this show, and there's a lot of different pools that you can get into on PulseX. Which ones are you interested in, Ewok? I mean, I already know the answer to this, but what do you not recommend, but what would you personally only be interested in providing liquidity for, assuming that you feel like you have enough tokens that you don't mind kind of locking them up like that together, out of the different ones that are on PulseX? Because again, we did see the APYs go up. And anytime this happens, an incentive token goes up, it's a lot different when you're earning like 50 cents on incentive token, or even less than that. I mean, it was $80 at the beginning at the launch of this thing, which is just totally insane to think of now. But yeah,
I think.
Yeah. So like, what are you in favor of providing liquidity for, and what do you think are some best practices for doing so?
Well, if you're talking PulseX, I prefer, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I prefer the PulseX pair, only because I don't mind which one of those I end up with more of. If there is some impermanent loss, I'm not going to be upset that I end up with a little bit more of the other token. The problem with providing liquidity that you have to be careful of is when it's with a stable coin and your main token goes up in value and your stable coin, isn't going to, it's always going to be at $1. So what happens is you end up with way more of that stable coin than you do the original coin that you put in the first place. That's where your impermanent loss really hurts. For example, when you supply liquidity, you have to put an identical amount on each side, right? So let's just use Hex for example. If you're going to put in $100 of USD, you have to put in $100 of Hex, which at this point, let's just, for the sake of making it easy, say it's at a penny, you would put 10,000 Hex in for your $100 of USD. Now, as the price of Hex goes up, it's got to balance it. So you may end up with $200 of USD, but you're only going to have 5,000 of your Hex. So it auto balances the whole way if you provide liquidity in that sense. So, you've got to be very careful when you pair it with a stable coin, because that's what can really happen. And then you have a lot less of your Hex. Now, it's very good when the price comes back down. So you end up with a lot more of the coin that you like, but the value of it's going down. So you have to be careful. Now, one of the cool things that is out there, and this is kind of veering off the topic, not really topic, but the question, the PH system, they have multi-coin pools of liquidity. So you can enter a hexahedron type pool where you're putting in 25% of Hex, 25% of PHEX, 25% Hedron, and 25% ICOSA, for example. That may not be the right ratios, but you're spreading it across and still earning the fees that way. It all self-balances. So, again, if you like all of those coins, it's a better kind of thing to get into, because as it rebalances, you're not going to be terribly upset when they all rise together, pretty much, because they're tied together. But again, if you're a fan of all the tokens, that's a possibility as well. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I would just be very, very cautious on a bull run of pairing anything with a stable token, unless you really know what you're doing, because quite often, if you're not paying attention to it and rebalancing and rebuying with your fees, you could get easily left behind.
Yeah, that's a dangerous one. Yeah, especially with these violent moves up and everything. But long story short, I mean, yeah, you're in favor of at least doing the Pulse and Pulse X pool. And that's, also, yeah, you want both tokens. You know that they're linked together and going to go up. But I think you also, in some ways, hope that they stay kind of within the range that they've been in ratio wise, which they basically have. I mean, this run
Yes.
up by Pulse X when everything went up is the closest it's kind of closed the gap on Pulse. But we've seen it from one to 2.5 to like 1 to almost 4 at its worst. Pulse against Pulse X. But it has stayed within that range. So, it's up to whoever's comfortable doing it. And obviously when you're done providing liquidity, you can pull it out at any time. It's not like there's a locked period you have to live up to or anything
Right.
like that.
Right.
And you don't have to do it for your whole stack necessarily either. So I think it's to each his own. Keep in mind, I mean, the real gains are going to be just from these things going up in price.
Sure.
But you also, it's fun to think about, like, where could the ink token, incentive token be eventually price wise if you've been earning that those rewards from it all this way. So
Yeah, and not selling them and not dumping them. I'll give
yeah.
you an example of kind of what happened to me when I entered liquidity. Um, let's say for every 10 pulse that I entered into liquidity, I think I had to put 27 pulse X in. And at one point, it had moved up to where I had only 8 pulse and 300 pulse X. But it has since balanced itself back out now, to where it was originally. So it does move up and down, back and forth. But again, if you're in it long term enough, and you don't care which one you end up with a little bit more of, it all works out, and you're yielding all of that incentive as well, which you can in turn create another pair. If you think like I do that the incentive token is going to go up in value, it might not be a bad play to put a little bit in the side. You know what I mean? Just to
Mhm.
earn a little bit extra of that as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely another good opportunity. And, I think as over the last 6 months, people weren't really focused on it as much just because things were just so down and everybody was more focused on just acquiring the coins that they wanted to in this ecosystem. Now that we're moving back up, of course, and now that we're seeing the incentive token pump like that, people have some interest in liquidity providing again. So definitely another opportunity for you in this ecosystem.